My daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and told me to pay for her $90,000 renovation, or I would never see my grandchildren again, and I just nodded, slow, and said nothing, and she had no idea I'd already written a name into my will 3 days before, a name that was about to take everything from her. And listen, before I take you into all of it, I'm really grateful you're sitting here with me tonight. That's not a small thing to me. Drop the name of your city down in the comments, would you? Because I go through everyone, and I'll call you out by name in the next story I tell. A like helps, a subscribe helps even more. That's the whole reason a little channel like mine keeps breathing. Okay. So here's the thing I want you to understand before anything else, because it's the part that still keeps me up. A month before she sat on my couch, my grandson Cody had a soccer game up in Wexford, and I drove all the way out there, 40 minutes, and I stood in an empty parking lot because Whitney had forgotten to tell me it got moved. And when I called her, she was so sorry. Oh, it must have slipped her mind. And there was this little thing under the sorry, this little smile in her voice, and my gut, my old lady gut went cold. Because I knew right then. She wasn't forgetting anything. She was testing the leash. She was finding out how easy it would be to keep those kids away from me. I just didn't know yet how fast she'd pull it. I'm 63. I've lived in the same brick house in Squirrel Hill, here in Pittsburgh, for 31 years. My husband Ray and I bought it and raised our boy Danny in it. And Ray passed 4 years ago, aneurysm, gone before the ambulance even made it up the hill. So it was me and that house and my 2 grandbabies, Cody's 9 and Emma's 6. And those 2 are the whole reason I get up in the morning. I did the airport runs. I did every stomach bug and every snow day. When the district closed and both parents had to work, Cody learned to ride his bike in my driveway, scraped both knees on my concrete, and I'm the one who cleaned them up. That's who I was to them. Keep that in your head, because it's what she tried to take. Danny married Whitney 7 years ago, and I'll be fair, in the beginning she was lovely to me, called on Sundays, remembered how I take my coffee. But every kind thing came with a little hook in it. She'd say what a shame it was, me rattling around in all that square footage all alone. She'd thank me for babysitting, and then float how much easier life would be if I sold the Squirrel Hill place and moved out by them in Cranberry. And I laughed it off. Ray always said I could find a storm cloud in a clear sky. I wasn't finding storm clouds. I was just early, because Whitney had done the math on me. A paid-off house in Squirrel Hill that's worth about $600,000 now, plus Ray's pension and 30 years of savings. And somewhere in her head, my whole life had already turned into her down payment. She just needed me to be reasonable about it. And I was taking too long. Now the renovation. This is where it turns. Danny and Whitney bought this big new build out in Cranberry 2 years back. More house than anybody needs, and Whitney could not leave it alone. First the backyard, this whole pergola thing. Then, last fall, she decided the kitchen and the master bath had to be gutted, the ones that came brand new with the house, because some woman from Emma's dance class had done hers. And I heard through Danny they were fighting about money, that the pergola went way over, that the cards were maxed, and I thought, well, that's theirs to sort out. I had no clue I was the sorting out. It was a Tuesday in November, that wet Pittsburgh cold that gets in your knees. Whitney texted, asked to stop by, just her, said she wanted to talk about the holidays, and my dumb happy heart went, oh good, she wants to plan Thanksgiving. I made coffee, put out the good Piesel from the Italian place on Liberty. She didn't touch them. She sat down on Ray's and my couch, and she had a folder with her, an actual folder, and she slid it across the coffee table, and it was a rendering, her new kitchen, with the number right there on the estimate. $91,400. And I laughed because I thought she was showing me a dream. You know, look at this crazy thing I want someday. She didn't laugh. She looked at me and she said, "Real even. Ray would have wanted the grandkids growing up in a beautiful home." And my stomach dropped because that's a rehearsed thing to say. Nobody says that off the cuff. I said, "Honey, I don't understand." And she told me. Just like that. Said the family had done the math and it made the most sense for me to help, that I was sitting on all this equity doing nothing with it, that Danny was too proud to ask, so she was asking for him. And I said I can't just hand over $90,000. That's most of what Ray left me. That's what I live on. And that's when she said it. And I'll remember her flat face till the day they put me in the ground. She said, "I think you should really consider it, because the kids are getting to the age where they notice who shows up for them and who doesn't. And it would just break my heart if they grew up thinking Grandma didn't care enough to be in their lives." I said, "Are you threatening to keep my grandchildren from me?" And she smiled. She smiled and she said, "I'm just telling you how children see things. Pay for my bathroom, or you'll never see them again. On my couch. Over Ray's pizzle." Now a lot of people expect me to say I broke down right there. And I'll be honest with you, because that's the deal you and me have. Inside I was shaking. Inside I wanted to grab her by that blowout and throw her off my porch. But I've been alive a long time, and I've learned the loudest thing you can do to a person like that is go quiet. So I nodded, slow. I said, "I hear you. Let me think about it." And her whole face relaxed, because in her mind, that was a yes. That was the old lady folding. She patted my knee, told me to take my time, gathered up her folder, and on the way out she took a Pizel, one, like a little trophy. And here's what she didn't know. 3 days before she came to squeeze me on my own couch, I'd already been to see my lawyer. Because after that empty parking lot in Wexford, my gut wouldn't shut up. So I went and saw Ed Kaczmarek, done my legal since Ray was alive, office over near Forbes and Murray, glasses always crooked. And I told him, "Ed, I want to fix things so whatever happens to me, my grandkids are taken care of directly, and nobody can use that money as a weapon, and nobody can spend it who isn't them." And Ed, bless him, didn't ask a lot of questions. He just said, "Marlene, we can do that." Let me tell you what I did, and I'll keep it plain because I'm no lawyer, and neither are you. I set up an irrevocable trust for Cody and Emma, not for Danny, not for Whitney, for the kids, by name, directly. The house, when I'm gone, doesn't go to my son to do whatever his wife tells him. It goes into that trust for the two of them. Ray's money, my money, all of it, in. And it doesn't get handed to two little kids either. It's locked up, released for college, for a first house, in pieces when they're older. And the person holding the keys, the trustee, is not Danny. And it sure as God is not Whitney. It's my sister Kath, retired principal down in Mount Lebanon, never took a thing from anybody in her life. And I trust her with my breath. Ed made her trustee. And then he did one more thing, the thing that ended up mattering most. He put in my nomination for guardian, if anything ever happened to both parents. And I didn't name Whitney. I named Kath there too. So the name I wrote into my will, the name that flat face on my couch would have killed to know, wasn't hers. It was my grandbaby's. And behind them, Kath. Whitney built her whole threat on the idea that she stood between me and the kids, and between the kids and everything I own. And 3 days before she opened her mouth, I'd quietly walked around behind her and cut every string she thought she was holding. She just didn't know it yet. If this were a fairy tale, I'd have told her right then and watched her face fall. But I didn't, and it cost me. Because I knew Whitney. Tell her that day and she takes the kids out of pure spite. and it's my word against hers. Poor confused old widow. I needed her to keep going. I needed her to put it in writing. And she did, because I didn't pay. A week went by, then two. No $90,000 showed up, and Whitney's patience, which was never real to begin with, ran right out. First it was Thanksgiving. So sorry, they were doing it with her family in Ohio this year. Maybe Christmas. Then Cody had a birthday in December, and I mailed a card with a little money in it, and got a text back, not from Cody, from Whitney, saying they were teaching the kids that love isn't about money, and she'd appreciate it if I didn't send cash. Love isn't about money, from the woman who tried to sell me my grandkids for a kitchen. And then the phone went quiet. I'd call, and it rang out, text, and get nothing. I drove out to Cranberry once, unannounced, sat in that cul-de-sac like a criminal, and I saw Emma's little face in the front window. And then Whitney appeared behind her and pulled the curtain shut, slow, looking right at me. And an hour later, Danny texted me from work, said, "Mom, you can't just show up. You're upsetting Whitney. Please respect our space." Our space. He didn't even know what she'd said to me. She'd told him some story where I was the problem. And she wasn't just working on Danny. She was working the whole family. I found that out at the Giant Eagle up on Murray, of all places, standing there with a cart, and I ran into her mother, Pam, who I'd sat next to at both baby showers and at the twins' baptisms. And Pam looked at me like I'd tracked something in on my shoe. Barely a hello, and this tight little, "Well, I hope you're doing all right, Marlene," in a way that meant, "I hope you're ashamed of yourself." And I stood there in the cereal aisle figuring out that Whitney had gone around telling people I'd refused to help my struggling son, that I was hoarding my money while my grandkids went without, that I'd cut them off. She flipped it. The woman who tried to extort me had told everybody I was the cold one. And I couldn't even defend myself, because what was I gonna do? Corner Pam by the oatmeal and say your daughter tried to sell me my own grandchildren? And the worst one, around New Year's, Cody figured out how to get on some game chat thing on his tablet, and he found a way to message me through it, and he wrote, in that shaky 9-year-old spelling, "Grandma, are you mad at us? Are you mad at us? My baby thought I was mad at him." I typed back that I loved him more than anything, and I'd see him so soon, and before I could even finish the account, got shut off mid-sentence, blocked, and I sat there staring at a screen that said, "This user is no longer available." She'd been in his tablet. She'd found the one little door he'd cracked open to his grandma, and she'd shut it while I was still typing. And that was almost the thing that finished me. And I've got to be real with you about this stretch, because this is the part nobody films. This is where I almost broke and did the thing she wanted. I wasn't sleeping. I'd wake at 4 in the morning doing the math a new way each time. Maybe it's not really 90. Maybe I offer 40, and she takes it. Maybe I sell the house, move out to Cranberry like she always wanted, be the grandma down the street, buy my way back in. I actually sat at Ray's computer at 3 in the morning with my reading glasses on, pulling up what the house might list for. That's how far down she had me. Ready to sell the home Ray and I built over 31 years. The driveway with Cody's knee marks on it, just to be allowed to see the kids I helped raise. I sat in that empty house through Christmas. No tree. What's the point of a tree? And I called Kath one night around 2 in the morning, falling apart, saying maybe I should just give her the money. Maybe I'm a stubborn old fool. Maybe I'm gonna die with my grandbabies thinking I abandoned them. And Kath, who never raises her voice, said one thing. She said, "Marlene, if you pay her this time, what does she ask for next year? You pay her now. You're not buying the kids back. You're buying the next threat." I knew she was right, but knowing somebody's right doesn't fill the chair at Christmas dinner. Okay, here's where it turns. Here's the part I've been dying to tell you. Whitney made a mistake. 2 of them. The first, she got greedy and sloppy. because she was so sure I'd cave, she stopped hiding the threat. In January, she sent me a text, an actual text, from her actual phone, and I still have it. She wrote, and I'm reading it close, "Danny and I have decided the kids need boundaries with people who make everything about money. When you're ready to genuinely contribute to this family the way we discussed, the door is open. Until then, it's better for everyone if you give us space. When you're ready to contribute the way we discussed." She put the extortion in writing. Ed nearly fell out of his crooked glasses. And the second mistake, the big one, she forgot who Danny was underneath her. My son's weak. He let her run him. He believed her stories. But Ray raised him, and Ray would have crawled over glass for his own mother. Danny's 40th was the end of January, and Whitney threw a big thing at a country club up in the North Hills, wanting everyone to see the good life. And she didn't invite me. But my niece Rachel got invited through the cousins, and Rachel loves me, and she called me the afternoon of the party and said, "Aunt Marlene, Danny keeps asking where you are. She told everybody you had other plans and didn't feel like celebrating him." And that was it. That was the last thing. She was rewriting me to my own son as a woman who didn't care about his birthday. So I called him on his birthday, and for once he picked up, probably standing at his own party feeling abandoned by his mother. I said, "Happy birthday, baby," and he got quiet and said, "Mom, why didn't you come?" And I said, "Danny, come to my house tomorrow, alone. Let me show you some things, and after you see them, you can decide who I am. 1 hour, alone." He came the next morning, hungover, thin, older than 40 ought to look, sat at my kitchen table where he ate 10,000 breakfasts as a kid, and I put my phone in front of him, and I let him read the texts. All of them, and I told him, in order, exactly what his wife said to me on my couch in November. Pay $90,000 or never see the kids. And I watched my son's face go from confused to know that can't be right to this gray stillness, because there was no story that fixed the words in front of him. Boundaries with people who make everything about money. Contribute the way we discussed. It was all right there in her own writing. He said real quiet, "She told me you didn't want to help. Said you called us spoiled. Said the money was yours and we could figure it out. Said you were the one who pulled away." And I said, "Danny, look at the dates. Look at who stopped answering who." And he did. He looked at 2 months of me calling and driving out to sit in his cul-de-sac, and 2 months of one-word answers, and pulled curtains. And he put his face in his hands at my kitchen table and cried like he was 9 and I couldn't fix it. And then I told him about the trust, that I did it in October, before any of this, not to hurt him, because my gut told me those babies needed a wall around them nobody could climb, that the house and the money go straight to Cody and Emma, that Kath holds it, that Whitney's name is on nothing. He stayed till it got dark. Asked me to make him the eggs I used to make. And I did. Now here's the part I promised you. The part where it actually lands. Because I wasn't there, but Danny told me every word after, more than once, and it's burned into me now like I watched it. He went home that night, and he didn't yell. That's not him. Whitney was at the kitchen island, that big quartz island the pergola money should have gone to, scrolling her phone, and Danny set his own phone down on the counter in front of her, screen up, the way she'd set that folder in front of me, and he said, "Read that out loud," and she looked at it, and she went, "What is this?" in that bright voice, and she started in on how his mother was manipulative, how I'd twisted things, how I'd always been jealous of her, and Danny said, "I didn't ask you what my mother is. I asked you to read your own text out loud, the one about contributing the way we discussed. Tell me what we discussed, Whitney." And she couldn't. That's the thing. She stood in her dream kitchen and she opened her mouth, and there was nothing to put in it, because the words were hers, from her phone, and my son was standing there not screaming, just waiting, and the waiting was worse than any screaming she could have handled. She tried. You're taking it the wrong way. You know I didn't mean it like that. Your mother is loaded, and she lets her own grandchildren. And Danny said, Don't you put them in your mouth right now. And that stopped her cold. And then he asked her the only question that mattered. He said, Did you tell my mother she'd never see our kids again unless she paid for this? This. And he knocked his knuckle on that quartz island once. And Whitney didn't say no. She said I was trying to protect our family. And Danny told me that's the moment he knew, because a no would have been a lie he might have wanted to believe. But I was trying to protect our family. That was a yes. That was her admitting it while she pretended she hadn't. He slept in the guest room. Then he stopped sleeping there at all. And here's a piece I got a real quiet satisfaction out of. God forgive me. Once Danny had the texts, Ed did what lawyers do. He sent a letter, not a screaming one, just a plain one, on his letterhead, laying out in flat legal language that the trust was irrevocable, that the guardian nomination existed, that any suggestion the grandchildren's access to their grandmother was being conditioned on payments would be documented. And I heard Whitney called Ed's office herself once, hot, saying this was harassment, and Ed just told her, Calm as anything, ma'am. I'd encourage you to put that in writing, too. He'd already learned she liked to put things in writing. She hung up, never wrote a word after that. Funny how that works. They'll threaten a widow all day, but the second there's a letterhead involved, they go real quiet. And Pam, Whitney's own mother. Somewhere in the spring, Pam heard the real version, I don't know how. Maybe Danny, maybe she read the texts herself. And she called me, cried on the phone, said, Marlene, I believed her. I'm so sorry. I said things to you in that store. And I told her the truth, that I never blamed her, that a mother believes her daughter. That's how it's supposed to go. But I'll tell you, when even her own mother is calling your cast-off mother-in-law to apologize, you've run out of people to fool. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you the marriage blew up in one night, because life's slower and uglier than that. But they separated in the spring. He moved into an apartment in Robinson, and the $91,000 kitchen that started all of it never got built, because there was never money for it. That was the whole point. I was the money. And Whitney, who spent 7 years positioning herself to inherit a Squirrel Hill house and a widow's savings, ended up across a table from a man who now had 2 months of documented proof, in her own handwriting, that she'd used their children as a bargaining chip against his elderly mother. You can imagine how that reads in a custody file. I take no joy in the ugly parts, the kids caught in the middle. That's nobody's win. But I'll say it plain, the thing she wanted most, control of my son and everything attached to him, she lost all of it, and she lost it holding a folder with a bathroom in it. And the grandbabies. Oh, the grandbabies. The first weekend Danny had them on his own, he brought them here, and I heard Cody before I saw him. That boy has never once entered a building quietly. And he came barreling up my porch steps and hit me around the waist so hard he almost took me down. And Emma was right behind him, and she looked up at me with those huge eyes, and she said, Grandma, where were you? And I about died on the welcome mat. I said, I've been right here, baby. I never went anywhere. I promise you I never went anywhere. And I'm not going anywhere ever again. They're here most weekends now. Cody's back to scraping his knees on my driveway. Emma turned 7 at my kitchen table after all, a year late, and I made the cake myself and let her lick the bowl. And Danny comes for Sunday dinner with some color back in his face, and he looks at me when he talks now, like a man who woke up. It wasn't all smooth. I won't pretend it was. Emma had a rough couple of months where she'd get scared I was going to disappear again. She'd hold my sleeve at the door and not let go, and it took a while of me showing up over and over for her little body to believe it. Kids remember more than we think, and Danny carries a guilt about it that I keep trying to take off him because he was lied to same as everybody. But a man doesn't forgive himself easy for not seeing what was going on in his own house. We're working on it. Some Sundays he just sits in the kitchen a long time not saying much, and I let him. And at night when they've gone home and the house goes quiet, that quiet used to gut me, and it doesn't anymore. I sit in Ray's chair and I can breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs, the way you can't when you're carrying something heavy in your chest. I carried that folder around in there for 2 months, and it's gone, and my shoulders came down from around my ears, and some nights I just sit there and have a little cry out of pure relief. There's a good kind of crying. Took me 63 years to learn that, but there is, so here's what I'll leave you with. And it's nothing clever. I'm too tired to be clever. When somebody tells you they'll take away the people you love unless you pay, believe them. And hear what they just told you about those people, that they're not family to that person. They're a price tag, and you can't pay your way out of that. There's no number that makes them stop. There's only the next number. I could have written the check in November, and I'd have kept writing checks till I was in a state home, and Cody and Emma would have grown up watching Grandma get squeezed and somebody calling it love. I didn't write the check. I wrote a couple of names, 2 little ones. Cost me the worst winter of my life, and I'd do it again tomorrow the exact same way. And I'd hand her that last pitzel on the way out the door and let her think she won. Every time. Go call somebody who actually shows up for you. Tonight if you can. Life's short, and the good ones are fewer than you think. Don't wait on it.